Welcome to this deep dive into the future of jobs. You've given us a really interesting stack of sources this time,
Yeah.
headlined by the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report 2025. But we've also got some great supporting data from Coursera, Indeed, LinkedIn, and ADP Research.
Yeah, that's a really solid set of sources to be looking at this topic with.
It is, and it seems like you're really trying to get a handle on how is the job market evolving?
Hmm.
What skills are going to be important in the future? And how are companies adapting to all of this change? So,
Big questions.
big questions, exactly. So, let's dive in and see what we can uncover.
Sound good. Let's do it.
One thing that really jumped out at me right away was this idea that technology is both creating and destroying jobs, sometimes even within the same field. What's that all about?
Well, it's not just about robots replacing factory workers anymore, right? It's really about how technology is changing the nature of work itself across all industries.
So, it's not just about learning to code then, it's about understanding how technology is changing the game entirely.
Exactly. And if you look at the World Economic Forum report, they actually highlight broadening digital access as the most transformative trend, even more so than specific technologies like AI.
Interesting.
Yeah, they found that 60% of employers believe that this broadening digital access will completely reshape their business by 2030.
Okay, so digital access is like the foundation.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
But how does that connect to, say, the rising cost of living, which
Mhm.
is another huge theme that came up in a lot of these reports? I mean, 50% of employers say that it's transforming their business, second only to digital access.
Well, think about it this way. You know, as digital access expands, it can open up new markets and new opportunities for businesses to reach customers. And that can potentially lower costs, which could help them navigate this cost of living crisis that we're all experiencing.
So digital access could actually be part of the solution for businesses.
In a way, yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so it helps with the cost of living. But what about climate change? That was another big one.
Right. Well, think about remote work, for example. That's been facilitated by digital tools, and that can reduce commutes, which helps lower emissions. So you can see how digital access can play a role in addressing some of these climate concerns.
So these trends, they're not happening in isolation. They're all kind of influencing each other.
They're interconnected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's not forget about these demographic shifts that are happening globally. Aging populations in some countries, growing working age populations in other countries. And that's creating both challenges and opportunities that businesses need to adapt to.
Okay, so we've got this like really complex backdrop of interconnected trends that are shaping the future of work. But how does all of this actually translate into the job market itself? I mean, are we talking about more jobs being created or lost overall?
Well, the report projects a net increase of 78 million jobs globally by 2030.
So that's good news, right?
It is good news, but it's not the whole story because there's a lot of churn happening under the surface.
What do you mean?
Well, within that 78 million net increase, they're projecting that 170 million new jobs will be created, but 92 million will be displaced.
Oh, wow. So even though we're seeing overall job growth, it doesn't mean that everyone can just like sit back and relax.
Exactly. It's not as simple as everyone keeping their current jobs. There's a lot of shifting and reshuffling that's going to happen.
So what kinds of jobs are growing the fastest, like percentage-wise?
Well, unsurprisingly, a lot of the fastest growing roles are in tech. Things like big data specialists, fintech engineers, AI and machine learning specialists. We're also seeing significant growth in green jobs as sustainability becomes a more prominent priority for businesses.
So if you're interested in tech or sustainability, that's a good place to be. But what about the jobs that are on the decline? What are we seeing there?
We're seeing a decline in roles like clerical workers, administrative assistants, printing workers, accountants, and auditors.
A lot of those seem like jobs that are tasks that can be automated.
You're right. And this brings us back to our earlier point. Technology is a double-edged sword. It's creating opportunities in some areas while displacing jobs in others.
Okay, so for someone listening who wants to make sure that their career is future-proof, what should they be focusing on? What kind of skills would set them apart from those in those declining roles?
Well, the report talks about what they call massive skill disruption, which sounds a little scary,
It does.
but it's actually stabilizing somewhat. They estimate that about 39% of workers' core skills are going to change by 2030.
Still a lot.
It is, but that's actually down from 44% in 2023. So the pace of change is still fast, but it's not accelerating as much as we might have feared.
That's something. Like, so what are these top skills we need to be thinking about?
Well, it's not just about technical skills anymore. You really need a mix of both hard and soft skills to succeed. We're talking analytical thinking, resilience, flexibility, leadership, creative thinking.
Wow, so you really need to be like a well-rounded individual to thrive in this new world of work.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And what about some of these fastest growing skills? What are we seeing there?
As you might expect, AI and big data networks and cybersecurity, technological literacy, those are all at the top of the list. But what's really interesting is that creative thinking and lifelong learning are also rising in importance.
So even in this tech-driven world, those uniquely human skills are still really important.
Absolutely. And on the flip side, we're seeing a decline in some skills like physical abilities, which is a first, along with traditional reading, writing, and math skills and manual dexterity.
So it's not just about keeping up with the latest technologies, it's about honing those uniquely human skills that set you apart in this increasingly automated world.
Right.
And what about generative AI? It seems like everybody's talking about that these days. How does that fit into all of this?
The report calls it the Gen AI wildcard because it has the potential to replace some tasks, but research suggests its biggest impact will be augmenting human skills.
So it's not about being replaced by AI, it's about learning to work with it effectively.
Exactly. Your ability to work alongside AI is going to be a key skill in the future.
Okay, so we've talked about the big macro trends shaping the world, the job landscape, the skills that individuals need. But what about companies? How are they adapting to all of this change? What are they doing?
Well, upskilling and reskilling are top priorities. Companies are investing heavily in training to keep up with this rapid pace of change. In fact, 50% of the workforce has already received some form of training.
Wow, that's a big number. So companies are taking this seriously.
They are, and it's not just about training. Attracting and retaining talent is also crucial. Companies are focusing on things like employee well-being, flexible work arrangements, diversity and inclusion, and skill-based hiring over those traditional degree requirements.
It sounds like companies are realizing that a happy and diverse workforce is actually a more productive and innovative one.
Absolutely. Yeah. And another interesting trend is this expected rise in wages. 52% of employers are anticipating allocating more revenue to wages by 2030. And this is driven by a combination of things, including productivity gains, competition for talent, and growing social pressure to address wage inequality.
So even in a time of economic uncertainty, there's reason to be optimistic about salary growth.
That's a fair assessment. And finally, let's circle back to AI. Most companies aren't just looking to automate jobs away. They're focused on reskilling their workers to collaborate with AI and hiring people with AI skills.
So AI is creating opportunities, not just eliminating them.
That's right. It's about finding the right balance and preparing your workforce for a future where humans and AI are working side by side.
This has been a really insightful overview of the future of work, and it's clear that we're in the midst of a major transition with technology driving change at an unprecedented pace.
You know, one thing that really strikes me from all of this research is just the sheer scale of change we're talking about.
It's a lot, right?
It's not just a few jobs here and there. It's entire industries that are being transformed.
And when you think about that 78 million new jobs net, that's a huge number.
It is.
But then when you factor in that 92 million jobs that are going to be displaced, it really highlights how important it's going to be to adapt.
Yeah, for both individuals and for companies.
That's everybody.
And that's really what we're going to be digging into more in this part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
How are companies tackling all of this change head on?
Yeah, let's get into that.
So the report breaks it down into a few key areas, and one that's clearly top of mind for a lot of employers is attracting and retaining talent. You know, it seems like the old playbook of just, offering a good salary and some benefits, that's not really cutting it anymore.
It's not enough.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
And you can really see that shift in all this research.
Especially like younger generations, they're looking for something more, like
Yeah.
a sense of purpose or a company that aligns with their values.
Yeah, and the data backs that up. The report actually states that supporting employee health and well-being is now the top priority for attracting talent, according to 64% of employers.
Wow. So that's a really big jump from even just last year.
It is.
So what does that actually look like in practice? Is it just, offering gym memberships or ping pong tables in the break room?
It's more than that. It's really about creating a workplace culture that genuinely values things like mental health, work-life balance, overall employee satisfaction.
So it's less about perks and more about policies that actually support people's lives.
I think that's a good way to look at it.
And what about flexible work arrangements? Because it seems like that genie is kind of out of the bottle after the pandemic.
You're right. And the report highlights both remote work within countries and across borders as being really important for attracting talent. So it seems like geography is becoming less of a barrier.
Yeah, you don't have to live in Silicon Valley to work for a tech company anymore.
Exactly. And this is exciting because it opens up opportunities for companies to access a much wider pool of talent.
And for people to live wherever they want.
Exactly. More flexibility for everybody.
But this new way of working has its own challenges too, right?
Of course. How do you manage remote teams? How do you build really strong communication channels? How do you foster a sense of community when everybody is spread out?
Mhm.
These are all new obstacles that companies need to figure out.
And then there's this whole issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI.
Right.
The report shows that 83% of companies globally have some form of DEI priorities in place, which is encouraging, but it feels like that's just the first step.
It's not enough to just talk about DEI. Companies actually need to walk the walk, and that means implementing concrete measures.
So, like, what kinds of things?
Things like conducting pay equity reviews, establishing employee resource groups, hiring dedicated DEI officers.
So, how does all of this tie back to attracting and retaining talent? Is it just good PR, or is there a real business case for this?
It's definitely more than just good PR. Diverse teams bring a wider range of perspectives and experiences to the table, and that can lead to better decision-making, more innovative solutions, and a more engaging and supportive work environment for everyone.
And a diverse workforce better reflects and serves a diverse customer base.
Exactly. So it just makes good business sense on multiple levels.
Okay, but let's not forget about a pretty fundamental factor when it comes to attracting and retaining talent, and that is fair compensation.
Right. Money matters.
The report indicates that 52% of employers expect to allocate a greater share of their revenue to wages by 2030.
That's good news for workers.
It is, especially given all those concerns about the rising cost of living.
Right. And this trend is being driven by a number of things. Companies are recognizing that they need to offer competitive salaries if they want to attract and keep top talent.
Yeah.
And there's also growing pressure from both employees and society as a whole to address wage inequality and ensure fair compensation.
So it's not just about attracting new talent, it's also about valuing the people you already have,
Exactly.
investing in them. And that brings us to upskilling and reskilling, which the report highlights as a major priority for companies these days.
It's not just about hiring new people with the right skills. It's about equipping your existing workforce with the knowledge and tools they need to stay relevant and thrive in this changing landscape.
The report actually says that 50% of the global workforce has already received some form of training.
That's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people. So it seems like companies are actually putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to this.
They are. And the report kind of breaks down this training into three main categories: upskilling in their current role, upskilling and redeployment within the organization, and then, well, there's always a percentage of workers who are unlikely to receive the necessary training.
And what happens to those workers? Are they just left behind?
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? These are often people in roles that are being automated away or in industries that are declining,
Mm-hmm.
and they need support to either reskill for a new career path or find opportunities in these growing fields. And this is where governments and policies need to come in.
The report actually mentions that funding for reskilling and upskilling is the most welcomed public policy support.
It is.
So it seems like there's a recognition that this isn't just a problem for individuals or companies, but for society as a whole.
Exactly. Governments need to invest in training programs and create incentives for companies to upskill and reskill their workforce. This is about making sure that entire economies can adapt to the changing demands of the job market.
So it sounds like a real collaborative effort is needed with governments, companies, and educational institutions all working together to create this more adaptable and resilient workforce.
I think you're absolutely right. And speaking of educational institutions, they have a crucial role to play in all of this too.
Mm-hmm.
They need to adapt their curriculum so that students are better equipped with the skills and knowledge that they'll need to succeed in this rapidly changing job market.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The challenges and opportunities of this future of work, the skills that are going to be in high demand, the strategies that companies are using to adapt. But there's this one big elephant in the room that we haven't fully addressed yet, and that's artificial intelligence.
It is the elephant in the room, isn't it?
Hey.
It's only getting bigger.
And its impact on the future of work is only just beginning to unfold.
Right. This is a topic that really deserves its own dedicated deep dive.
Agreed. So let's do that. It's time to tackle the big one, artificial intelligence.
It seems like it's everywhere these days.
It is, and its impact on the job market is only going to get bigger from here. The report called it a game changer, which I think is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, it's both incredibly exciting and a little bit unnerving at the same time.
For sure. So how should we be thinking about AI in the context of work?
Well, I think the most important thing is to approach it not with fear, but with a sense of possibility.
Okay.
It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
The key is to understand its capabilities and its limitations so we can harness its power in a way that benefits everyone.
The report really emphasized that it's not about AI replacing humans altogether. It's about finding ways for humans and AI to work together effectively.
Exactly. It's about leveraging the strengths of both. AI excels at those tasks that humans tend to find really tedious or difficult.
Like what?
Things like processing massive amounts of data, identifying patterns, automating repetitive actions.
So AI can handle the heavy lifting, so to speak, freeing up humans to focus on the things that they do best.
Exactly. Things like creativity, critical thinking, complex problem-solving, emotional intelligence, empathy. These are all areas where humans still have a significant advantage over AI.
So it's not about humans versus machines. It's about finding that right balance, the optimal collaboration between human and artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And the report actually highlights some of the ways that companies are already strategizing around this collaboration. The most common approach is reskilling and upskilling the existing workforce so they can work better alongside AI tools and technologies.
So instead of replacing their workers with AI, they're investing in training their employees to use AI to their advantage. Makes sense.
It does.
What does this training actually look like?
It really varies depending on the industry and the specific job roles, but it often involves things like learning how to use AI-powered tools, understanding the data that drives those tools, and developing the skills to interpret and act on the insights that AI is generating.
So it's not just about technical skills then. There's also kind of a mindset shift that needs to happen.
Absolutely. Employees need to be comfortable working alongside these AI systems, understanding their strengths and limitations, and embracing the potential for AI to augment their own capabilities.
So it's about seeing AI as a partner, not a competitor.
Exactly. And the report even points out that this collaboration is going to require a whole new set of skills and knowledge, what they call Gen AI literacy.
Gen AI literacy. That sounds interesting. What does that mean?
Basically, it's about developing a foundational understanding of how AI works, its potential applications, and also its ethical implications.
So this isn't just for like tech professionals then?
No, everyone in the workforce is going to need at least a basic understanding of AI because it's going to impact pretty much every industry in some way.
The report gave some really cool examples of how this is already playing out. Like in healthcare, AI is being used to analyze medical images, assist in diagnosing diseases, and even personalize treatment plans.
It's pretty amazing what it can do. AI can actually process vast amounts of patient data and identify subtle patterns that human doctors might miss, leading to faster and more accurate diagnoses.
And in finance, it's being used for things like fraud detection, algorithmic trading, and risk management.
Yeah, it's really helping to make financial systems more efficient, more secure, more data-driven.
And these are just a couple of examples. We're seeing AI being used in manufacturing, transportation, retail education, the list goes on.
And it's only going to continue to grow.
While there are definitely some valid concerns about AI and job displacement, it's important to remember that it's also creating tons of new opportunities and even new job categories that we can't even imagine yet.
I think that's a really important point to keep in mind. It's not just about jobs disappearing, it's also about new ones emerging.
So to be ready for those new opportunities, the key is to focus on those skills that AI can't replicate. Things like creativity, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, empathy.
Right, those uniquely human skills.
So in a way, AI is kind of pushing us to become more human, to really double down on the qualities that make us unique and valuable.
I like that. It's a very optimistic way to look at it.
Well, I'm an optimist. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the future of work, what's the one key takeaway you want our listener to remember?
I think the most important thing is to remember that the future of work is not predetermined. It's being shaped by this really complex interplay of forces. But ultimately, the most important factor in all of this is not the technology itself, but humanity. It's about leveraging those uniquely human skills and collaborating with AI to create a better future for everyone.
That's a powerful message. It's not about fearing the future or trying to resist change. It's about embracing the possibilities and equipping ourselves with the skills and mindset to thrive in this world that's being transformed by technology.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the future of work. Thank you so much for all of your insights. I think our listener has a lot to think about.
My pleasure. It's been a fascinating conversation.
And to our listener, thanks for joining us. We hope you found this deep dive informative and inspiring. And remember, no matter what the future holds, the most important thing is to stay curious, stay engaged, and keep learning.